Let's bring out our friend, the creator, the director, the executive producer, part of the brains behind the Sonic Highways episode that you just saw. Dave Grohl. Dave. So, I hardly know where to begin.
Once, actually. It was the same purple, and I'm not kidding.
It's very comfortable, isn't it?
It's nice, yeah.
I hardly know where to begin except to say you can only imagine how surreal it is to sit in this room and watch basically a movie about the history that was made in this room.
It's
on
strange.
This stage, as a matter of fact. Just to be sitting here talking about it.
Just coming back tonight, the week that we spent here, like this became our home, you know? Like we'd stay here all day long, record all day. I do my interviews. Jimmy Dale Gilmore I interviewed right up there, and then Gary I interviewed right here. And but walking back in today, it just felt like no time had passed at all, which is something special about this place, because if you lift up that curtain and you see that backdrop, it's the same backdrop that you've seen your entire life. So this place is kind of timeless, I think.
It is. I want to read something. Just take a half a minute. This is an email that you sent to me back in August of last year, August 29. Terry, hey man, how the hell are you? I'm sitting in a dingy hotel room outside of Milwaukee getting ready to play a gig for Harley Davidson. Don't ask, he says. I have a rare moment to myself, so I thought I'd write and tell you about this crazy idea I have for the next Foos record. I want to record each song in a different studio all over the country and film it for an episodic documentary series. More than just a documentary about the band recording their new album, we tell the incredible stories of the people behind each of these independent American recording studios, explore the inspired process of songwriting, and celebrate the rich history of American recording by focusing on each city's regional relevance. It's one hell of a project, but I'm going to pull it off, man.
And I'm a high school dropout.
And you did.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny. When I made the Sound City movie, I remember, because I don't know what I'm doing, I had this journal, and I imagined the movie in 3 acts. The first act being the history of the studio, the next act being the discussion of technology, and then the final act being the live performances. And so I wrote the whole thing out. It looked like a 5th grade science project or something. It was just this spiral notebook. And then I went on and I made the movie and stuff. And months after I finished the movie, I was cleaning out my garage, and I found that little spiral notebook thing, and I opened it up. And the 3 acts were exactly what the movie turned out to be. So, because what happens is when I come up with an idea, it might seem nuts, but I somehow force or convince everybody to do what I imagine to happen, and then it eventually actually happens the way I imagine it to happen. And that has to do not just with me, but all the people that we work with, which is one of the greatest luxuries of my life, that not only do I have the opportunity and resource to do something like this, and that's why it actually starts with a really silly email and then turns into that.
But having a vision is one thing, but being able to pull it off is quite another.
Yeah, I just don't really have any sense of consequence.
But
so
did you really have any idea how challenging this was going to be?
Oh, hell no.
I mean,
I haven't slept in 2 years.
Isn't this the toughest thing you've ever done in your life, except maybe getting married and fathering 3 little girls?
Yeah, well, this is honestly, it's hard for me. I'm bad with calendars and I'm terrible with schedules, but I know what I need to do day to day. So I know what I have to do in the next 12 hours, and I just do it. And I don't think about the next 2 months or the 3 months or the 4 months or the 5 months. So when we filmed all this stuff and recorded all this stuff, it was months before we actually edited the first episode. The first episode was Chicago, and I remember sitting down and watching it like, oh my God, it's fucking killer. This is amazing. I can't believe we pulled it off. That's great. And I was like, yay, champagne, let's go. And someone said, there's fucking 7 more of them. You know that, right?
And they're still editing the last couple, probably, right?
Well, we just finished actually the other day, and the champagne did go. But I'd never really imagined the scope of it all. Like, because you go to one city and you kind of have we came to each city with some kind of idea of what we wanted to accomplish. You can't necessarily write a documentary, but we would come to each city with an idea in mind or a theme in mind, and that made its way into the conversations with the people, which then made its way into the editing. And but I just didn't throughout the whole process, I didn't really have the big picture. It was just, what do we got to do this week? What do we got to do next week? We got 1 episode. All right, now we got 2 episodes. Now we got 3 episodes. And I've seen them all, so I know what we've accomplished. And it's still hard for me to wrap my head around because, I don't consider this work. I got to sit down on Willie's bus and talk to him for 45 minutes. It's like, shit, I do that for free, like even if the cameras weren't there. And so I think all of the people that have been working on this with us for the last 2 years, at some point it'll sink in and we'll be very proud of what we've done. But right now we're still just kind of buzzing.
Well, I do want to spend most of our time talking about the Austin episode, but before we get to that, you chose 8 cities. That must have been difficult in itself. I mean, there were obvious cities that you did not include. Memphis, I suppose.
Memphis,
Miami,
Philadelphia,
Minneapolis,
Detroit. There's so many cities that have incredible music histories, but we had to choose cities for specific reasons. If we had a personal connection, or if a city had a personal relevance. Chicago, that was the place where I really discovered music live music for the first time. D.C., that's where I grew up, in the Washington, D.C. underground music community there. Los Angeles, Pat Smear, born and raised there. Seattle, I have a lot of history in Seattle. So there were some places that we knew we were going to go to and tell a personal story. But a city like Austin, or Washington, D.C., a lot of people don't know the history of music from Washington, D.C., go-go music and Discord records. And that was stuff that I grew up with that I almost took for granted until I went around the world and realized not everybody has go-go music. Most people don't even know what go-go music is, because it's indigenous to Washington, D.C. It's from D.C. It doesn't even go to Baltimore or Richmond. So the fact that HBO was crazy enough to give me a television show, I'm like, well, I'm going to fucking tell someone about go-go. Because, shit, why not? Nobody else is going to do it. And so choosing the cities was tough. I mean, originally I was like, we're going to fucking Jakarta, and we're going to Reykjavik, and we're going to Sao Paulo, like that way. And then my manager was like, you know how much that's going to fucking cost? And so I was like, okay. So
well, that could be in season 2.
Shit,
or
season
3.
8. There ain't no season 2 for me, man. But it was tricky. But then the other tricky part was also choosing from 40 instrumentals, the 8 instrumentals, because we didn't have lyrics yet. So it was like, how do you choose the instrumentals and pair them to a city? And not only that, sequence the album in the sequence of the arc of the entire story. Dude, I haven't slept in fucking 2 years, man.
Let's talk about the songwriting process, because this sounds like the world's most difficult homework assignment. Basically,
so easy.
Really? I mean, you sat down in your hotel room with what? 20, 30 pages of transcripts from every interview, everybody you talked to in that previous week.
Yes.
And you had to pull words and phrases from those interviews and create a song.
It sounds difficult, but if you think about it, it's almost like reporting. One of my favorite interviews from I interviewed about 100 people. One of my favorite interviews was with Nora Guthrie, Woody Guthrie's daughter, right? And she talked about her father and the way he would write songs. And so basically, he was writing songs. He would always say, write what you see. So the songs that Woody Guthrie was writing, he was just writing about the plight of the American, and like he would experience something and he would write it. And sometimes it was so literal, it seemed like the most beautiful metaphor. Like a ribbon of highway or a no trespassing sign. You're like, yeah, man, I know what he's talking about. I feel the same way. And it's like, no, he fucking saw a highway and he saw trespassing. You know, so, so in that regard, it was easy, because all I had to do was stay here for a week and talk to people, and then look back at what we talked about and put it into a song, rather than like, you know, sitting on top of a mountaintop and channeling the creator to bring me some divine inspiration and emote or whatever. It was like, no, man, I'm talking about Austin, Texas. You know what I mean? So it was actually less. It was a lot less difficult than you'd imagine.
Well, you make it sound so easy. But so let's talk about Austin, Texas. How much did you know about Austin before you came here and spent the week in Studio 6A?
Well, I knew about the television show because I grew up watching that.
It's good for starters.
Thanks.
And you had been here back in 1987.
Came here in 1987.
And you were here with Nirvana and played a show at the famous
Liberty Lunch.
Liberty Lunch
Yeah.
in 1991, where the tickets sold for, I think, $7 at the time.
Those were the days.
So, but beyond that, what else did you know about Austin?
Well, I mean, probably what everybody knows. You'd show up in Austin, you're like, wait, this is fucking Texas? Really? Because it doesn't seem like the rest of it. No, I mean, you know, it really did seem like this oasis of alternative culture in the middle of a whole lot of country. You know, you'd imagine a city like this being 45 minutes from Baltimore, you know, or this is Portland of the South or whatever, you know. And but it just seemed like something special. You know, it really did seem like almost a mirage, you know. It's like, goddamn, I haven't seen a head shop in 1,200 miles. And then, hey, we're in Austin, you know. So, but, you know, it just seemed, and because of that, I mean, this is the thing that I started to realize in all of our travels, that really beautiful things happen when people come together, right? People come together for whatever reason. In Seattle, people come together in bars and basements because it's fucking raining all the time, you know. And in that, beautiful things happen, you know. Say there's someone that just feels different than everyone else in some little town in Texas, and they decide, you know what, I'm gonna go hang out with the freaks, and they come to Austin, Texas, and so it becomes a community of like-minded people, and you know, people sort of like-minded people gather together, and in that become a community, and some beautiful things happen. So I mean, even when I was young, 18 years old, the first time I ever toured America, coming through here, I was like, well, this is all right, you know. I felt comfortable here. I didn't know too much about, you know, the history of music in the city until I came here.
I'm sure you knew about Willie, obviously, in the country music scene, and about the blues scene, but you probably didn't know much about the punk scene in Austin, did you?
Well, you know, I knew more about the punk scene than Willie Nelson.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, talking to David Yao, or talking to Gibby from the Butthole Surfers, or talking to Tim from the Big Boys, like, it's one thing that I've learned over the years is the people, when you meet musicians that have really touched your life, those are the ones that you get starstruck in front of, you know. I remember the first time I met Neil Diamond. I never listened to Neil Diamond, so I was like, hey, Neil, what's up? Because his music hadn't changed my life. But the first time I met Henry Rollins, I was like, hi, I'm a Dave girl, you know. So it just depends. So I have my heroes, and they might be different than someone else's heroes. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a bunch of people playing music. But I knew more about the punk rock scene in Texas than I did a lot of the country or blues. So, but that was one of the great things about doing these interviews too, is like, I didn't know the answers to these questions. You know, when I went to New Orleans and talked to Ben Jaffe from Preservation Hall, the first thing I said to him, I said, I don't know shit about jazz, and I don't know shit about